Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyofacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyofacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul. And this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome back a special guest, my wife and co-host, Cheryl.
Hi.
You know, we recently aired a podcast titled Paul and Cheryl's All-Time Top 10 Cruises. I think at the end of that episode, I kind of surmised that we were about to embark on a cruise, Holland America Rotterdam, that might make its way on to the all-time top 10. After all, Rotterdam is Howe's flagship, their newest and largest ship, and the itinerary was a dream, starting with Howe's private island, Half Moon Cay, then Willemstad, Curacao, a passage through the Panama Canal, Cologne, Panama, Cartagena, Colombia, Port Alignment, Costa Rica, and Georgetown, Cayman Islands, over 12 days.
The wait to board the Rotterdam was terrible. A long line snaked around the building, and it was hot, with no water in sight. I have learned to give ships some slack on longer than normal queues to board. As we get older, though, boarding a cruise with inexplicable long queues in the heat become increasingly less tolerable. Our worst boarding experience was on one of my favorite ships, Symphony of the Seas, when it was so hot and also without water, my knees buckled and I almost collapsed. We later learned there was a fatality on the sailing prior to ours, and that contributed to the boarding situation. We don't know what the issue was with Rotterdam. Someone surmised that it was connected somehow to the government shutdown. I don't know. Just reporting something I heard. Once we got into the terminal, they were thankfully providing cans of water, and the line moved rapidly. And it wasn't long before we boarded. One thing that stands out for Holland America Lines is that it is first line we have been on that delivers your luggage directly into your room rather than outside your door. We experienced that on our first cruise on Howe. Last year on the Soul Train cruise on New Amsterdam, one of the aforementioned top 10 all-time cruises. We were especially appreciative of that little luxury on this trip, as we had more luggage than normal because this was the first leg of our side-to-side. After this cruise, we would be spending a couple of nights in Fort Lauderdale, then boarding the New Star Princess. Just like our first Howe cruise, we had a relatively roomy balcony cabin, a must for passing through the Panama Canal. Funny, this was our first cruise since we sailed the Explorer Journeys, where our suite was twice the size of our Howe cabin. Enough months have passed because it wasn't as much of a shock downsizing as we thought it would be.
We immediately went to the buffet for our traditional first Caesar salad and more. The buffet selections were varied and tasty, but can't touch our favorite, the buffet on premium competitor Celebrity Cruises Edge Class. To Howe's credit, I could be wrong, but I don't ever remember a buffet serving my cruise ship tradition, escargot, which the buffet on Rotterdam did at least once. I don't remember how many I ate, maybe I don't care to remember, but I recall going back for more. Given that embarkation was on a Sunday, we did nothing but watch NFL football until it was time to go to dinner. First dinner was at Rudy's Celle de Mer, a French-inspired seafood restaurant. Rudy Soderman has been on the podcast a couple of times, and I can't wait to have him back. But Rotterdam finally enabled us a chance to check out one of his restaurants. He also has a restaurant on Carnival XL class, Rudy's Sea Grill, which we couldn't get into on Mardi Gras as it was sold out. And he had two restaurants on Star Princess. That's the ship we were boarding in a couple of weeks. Rudy's Celle de Mer lived up to its reputation. My appetizers were baked escargot and mushroom soup. Yum. Cheryl got garlic and butter shrimp. All were outstanding. My main was Chiopini with clams, mussels, crab, scallops, and shrimp, and Cheryl had the catch of the day, blackened sea bass. We finally got a chance to enjoy one of Rudy's restaurants, and it was outstanding.
Our first night at the main dining room had a Caribbean theme. An appetizer choice was Jamaican beef patties. A main, which we both got, was oxtails, and our dessert choice, Caribbean cream. We ate dinner in the main dining room a couple of times and were pleased. There was ample competition, though. Both included like the buffet, the outdoor pizza spot that stayed open until 11:30, two specialty restaurants. In addition to Rudy's, we tried the Pinnacle Grill, Hell's Steakhouse, and Tamaran, one of the top Pan-Asian restaurants at sea. We had tried Tamaran on New Amsterdam and found it worthy of another visit. Both Pinnacle Grill and a Tamaran both delivered as we had expected.
An unexpected treat, though, was the seafood boil, which was a pop-up of sorts held in a section-off area of the buffet. For $35 per person, we booked the meal featuring a starter, which was seafood chowder, the seafood boil main, and a dessert. We sat in a special area and were outfitted with a giant lobster bib. After drinks were ordered, Blue Moon for me, water for Cheryl, we got the first course, a hearty bowl of seafood chowder that was killer, among the best I have had. So much so that I was inclined to ask for a second serving, but was talked out of it by Cheryl. Good thing, because you needed a lot of room for the main, which was served in a metal pot. The seafood boil comprised of lobster, clams, mussels, salmon, shrimp, and crab, plus corn and potatoes served with a piece of cornbread. Almost an afterthought was the dessert, because by this time we were stuffed. There are some mixed reviews online, but we found the seafood boil was well worth it, and we will do it again when we are on the Eurodam in February for the Soul Train cruise. We give the overall eating experience on Holland America Rotterdam as a B+.
For NFL and NBA fanatics like us, this is a great time of year when both sports are going full tilt. Between the in-cabin small selection, but adequate for us, television channels and the NBA app, we gorged on sports. Good thing, because there were few shows available on Rotterdam. It had recently repositioned, and the big shows were not ready yet. That was fine for Paul, but not so much for me, as I like to check out the shows.
Another first for Hal, We did check out our first ventriloquist show, and we both really enjoyed it. They also had a comic. He was funny enough to go back to see him a couple of nights later where he promised new material. I kind of thought he was going to be a little risque on the second night, maybe wishful thinking. But both nights he was very family friendly, although you saw few families in the audience. He certainly knew his audience, which was comprised of a noticeably older demographic than I've seen on other cruise ships. Of course, the only time I had been on Howard was for the Soul Train cruise, and that definitely was not an older crowd. More what I call grown and sexy. I'm not knocking old people on how. I'm an older cruiser. But to be honest, this brought back vibes of when I lived in Florida in my 50s and 60s, and it was common for me to be addressed in publics as young man. The highlight of this cruise was the itinerary. The first stop was Half Moon Cay, Howe's private island, parts of which is being renovated. It was nice enough, typical private island food, but I will never give complete credit to a private island where your drink package doesn't work. The second stop was Curacao, where we visited several times. We got off the ship, but we did not do an excursion.
After a couple of days of sea, we reached Latin America, and our first port was Cartagena, Colombia. We took an excursion, or tour of Cartagena, even though we had Hal's Have It All package, which gave you an allowance towards the Rotterdam excursions. We booked this one through our own travel agency, The Joy of Vacation by Dream Vacations. Dream Vacations excursions are cheaper and use top vendors. We had several Viator tourists in our group, and you can book an excursion through us even if you book the cruise somewhere else. Cartagena is a beautiful city with great history and culture. A part of it is heavily developed with an amazing skyline, world-class hotels, and expensive dwellings. It is self-sufficient via its oil. Its main industry is tourism, and its port is one of the busiest in the Caribbean. There is very clearly a divide between class, much more pronounced than even in the U.S. I will note that the street vendors in Cartagena are the most persistent I've ever encountered. One woman started massaging my leg, then quickly produced massage oil. She didn't want to accept no for an answer.
The next day, we reached the Panama Canal. We had gone to a standing room only presentation about the development of the canal that was so good that virtually none of the standees, including Cheryl and me, left after over an hour and a half. As I listened to the presentation, I made plans to read one of the authoritative texts about the Panama Canal's development. I do have one complaint. We tried to find a replay of the presentation on the cabin television and could not. That seemed like such a missed opportunity. A frequent contributor on the film presentation was an author of African American or African descent, and I wanted to see the name of her book that was referenced several times.
We needed to get up at 5 a.m. to experience the entire process of traversing the canal. It was a very deliberate process that takes several hours. We experienced it alternatively via our balcony and the cabin TV, which was on the forward webcam feed. The Panama Canal is truly an engineering marvel. But for those of you who have experienced a river cruise, which also depends on the similar technology to traverse river lock, experiencing the locks is a lot more dramatic. dramatic because of the size of the vessels involved and the more enclosed feeling of being able to touch the walls closed in on you.
We got a few fascinating canal photos and videos, and I posted a reel on Instagram. One of my Instagram friends, house superfan Candace of Sea of Glamour, who has been on the podcast before, liked the post and asked me if I was on the Rotterdam right now. Turns out Candace and her husband Cor were on as well, and Cheryl and I met up with them. They invited us to the captain celebration where they were going to be recognized as a Howl Mariner with something like a zillion nights. So I went to provide support and take a few pictures to give Candace and Cor. Of course the event was professionally photographed by Howl staff. Candace is responsible for turning me on to a couple of guests who have been on the Joy of Cruising podcast, including Rudy. I was quite pleased when she introduced me to the hotel director, Errol Nelson. Although I doubt he would come on the podcast given his role, it is nice in any event to interact with key cruise line personnel, and Candace knows more at Howl than most.
After passing through the canal, Rotterdam ported in Cologne, Panama. As much as we would have liked to have experienced Panama, we had been up since 5 a.m. and it was Sunday. You know, football day. The next day, we stopped in Puerto Limon, Costa Rica, a first time for us on an island filled with culture. We used our excursion credit from the Have It All promotion and took a wonderful city tour that took us to a beautiful seaside park. We both got caught up in that culture, getting separately pulled up to the stage to dance with some obviously very skilled dancers. Of course, we were not, especially Paul. Our next stop was another place we had been to multiple times, Georgetown, Cayman Islands. Fortunately, we still had excursion credits, so we took a tour and saw some new things and some things old.
Like the obligatory visit to hell.
Among the things new, though, was after almost 40 years of cruising, for the first time, we went on a craft that submerged itself in the water. It was thrilling, surreal, and just a tiny bit spooky all at once. In the middle of the voyage, while the vessel is submerged, the captain kills the engine, dons a wetsuit, and then goes outside to feed and thus stir up the fish. And that he did quite well as the fish swarmed the vessel. The guide who remained inside the submarine joked how if the captain doesn't make it back, he will be promoted to captain. It gets laughed, but we didn't completely feel content until we heard that engine sputtering back to life.
Our cruise on Rotterdam was very good. No, it didn't make it onto our list of all-time cruises, although I will never forget our Panama Canal experience. The ship itself was very nice, but we kind of expected a huge difference between Howl's flagship and the previous Howl ship we went on, New Amsterdam, which is 10 years older and a smaller class. There really wasn't. So while Rotterdam pleased us, it didn't wow us. Again, the service was impeccable, food and beverage were excellent, and oh yeah, did I mention that they bring your luggage into your room? Well, we'll see you next week. As we like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.